You were responding in this particular Twitter thread that I saw to somebody who was suggesting that we don't have visual depictions of a lot of these great Old Testament figures,
Mm-hmm.
and that this, of course, eventually Christians should, rediscover greatness in the visual arts, but that this using AI to
Mm-hmm.
create depictions of certain Old Testament figures is kind of like a stopgap until then.
Mm-hmm.
And you made the case, which you just mentioned, the analogy to pornography, that this is not something that like will tide us over till we get there. This is something that trains us to prefer something fake to the real thing. And
Yeah.
and you used the phrase that it scratches the itch. And so but the itch is for the purpose of the actual reality.
Yeah.
The itch is not supposed to be scratched for its own sake, and
Yeah.
so we are missing. You said it was short circuiting the
Yeah.
actual real human drive involved here.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, people might argue that I'm just removing the manual labor almost
Mm-hmm.
from art. So I don't have the physical technique to do this, but I have the ideas, and the idea is where the art is. And it's like, I guess if you have no experience making art, then you can think that
Mm-hmm.
that I'm just going to be the idea guy, and I can
Mm-hmm.
put a sufficiently detailed prompt into this
Mm-hmm.
so that it really is, my idea and it's artistic work. But that's just,
It just makes it clear that you have never done art.
yeah.
Um,
Because there is something that you learn in the process. Like, yes, a sufficiently great and experienced artist can have that experience of like seeing the entire thing in his mind
yeah.
all at once and then
Mm-hmm.
executing it. But most of the time, certainly in music, which is an art that proceeds in
Mm-hmm.
time, right?
Mm-hmm.
What you're doing is moment by moment, you're getting more of the thing. And
Mm-hmm.
it's in the process of doing it that you do more of it. And that's certainly something that happens in the imagination. You receive more of it over time.
Mm-hmm.
And the materials themselves can like lead you in a certain direction.
Yeah.
You're interacting with something real. And but still it's something that it leaves room for inspiration, for even divine inspiration, in the process of making something. And the thing is that you can put in a prompt, but a human artist can put love and devotion and even like spiritual intention into every detail,
Mm-hmm.
let's say in the visual art that he's making.
Mm-hmm.
And in the case of religious iconography, there's this tradition of the very making of the icon, especially in the East, is a prayer.
Mm-hmm.
In order to make a proper devotional work, especially anything that's going to be used in a liturgical context, you need to do this with knowledge
Mm-hmm.
of the holy person being depicted,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to be able to do it with intention and love. But AI doesn't actually know anything.
Yeah.
It has no knowledge. It has information, it has data. That's not the same thing as knowledge. I don't know how much I can like sort of explain that here, but it's not the same as knowledge, and it certainly is incapable of love. It's incapable of real spiritual devotion. And so the personal devotion in the actual execution is not the same as kind of like a pious intention in sort of putting in a generalized prompt that a machine then executes the details of, and therefore it doesn't come through in the final result. And it's not like commensurate with the actual needs of an artwork, let alone religious artwork, let alone religious artwork that's not merely illustrative, but is supposed to serve an actual like purpose in prayer.
Yeah.
You're not able to kind of encounter the person on the other side of the artwork because, first of all, there's not a person executing it. And also, the AI doesn't know the person who's being depicted. We can actually have personal knowledge, a personal relationship with the saints, and that cannot be conveyed through the medium of AI because AI is not so much a medium as it is a completely different kind of reality. Um, yeah.
Well, it's not, because that implies an ontological heft, and there's no ontological heft there, unless there, I mean, unless there is, in which case we got to stay away from it. Which we can talk about later. But like, it's not a different reality. It's a lack of reality. It's like it
Right.
is. You can
Yes. Yeah.
see,
Good
you
point.
can really see sin as privation in AI, because it's a falling away from reality.
Yeah.
It's not an alternative reality. And I think that, I mean, one way to just sort of like talk about, especially sort of like Protestants could like wrap their heads around what you're talking about, with the purpose of, for example, what the Easterns call writing an icon, is if you look at the way that, the instructions for building the temple or the tabernacle, say, worked, like aesthetic creation, like doing all of these like jillion different craftsman like craftsman traditions that are listed in the instructions for building the tabernacle, like those are meant to serve God. Those are like what worship is meant to organize our cultural lives, like absolutely. And the tabernacle and then later the temple are incredibly powerful illustrations of that. Like God is like, here are the different you know the 80 different, sort of separate crafts and arts that you are going to have to get really good at in order to make and then, you know bring to life this place of worship that I want. um and you know an AI can't worship, an AI can't pray. And what the purpose of our lives, of all of our lives, is worship. And certainly the purpose of our aesthetic lives, and certainly the purpose of our aesthetic lives when we are specifically doing Christian art, is worship of God. And we can't outsource that. He will not accept worship that we outsource.
Yeah. No, that's all great. You know, uh, there's so many different directions to go into. But we could also talk about just like what is this? I'm thinking about the visual arts a lot here. When you look at this stuff, it also I keep coming back to the fact that we've been preparing ourselves for this because we've already become accustomed to work that is so glossy and
Hmm.
has its humanity stripped away. So in music, the use of auto tune, for instance, on somebody's voice, or the computerized regularity of rhythm in
Yeah,
modern
yeah.
electronic pop music, where human rhythm breathes. It's not perfectly regular,
Yeah.
all of these different things, or even like in cinematography, there's this trend towards this very glossy kind of commercialized look in all, a lot of movies that are made now. And So when you look at this AI art, there's something kind of glossy and soulless about it. And that's partially because it, doesn't have a soul, but it's also partially because I think of what people are looking for when they use this technology. I don't know how it's all trained and stuff, but people have commented when an AI image of the Virgin Mary comes up, there's always this kind of like glossy sensuality to it,
Hmm.
almost like it's been trained on
Porn.
porn, anime,
Yeah.
whatever, and that it is, there's ethical issues that people bring up of like stealing people's work and incorporating it into AI work, but also the issue of like, where is this stuff being sourced from? How do you know that pornographic images are not being used to source
Yeah.
the faces of religious art?
I mean, they definitely are. That's how it works.
But my understanding is that that's entirely possible, or at least images that are just inappropriate in some other way, for the ethos of what is being conveyed. And nobody seems to, that doesn't seem to make anybody lose any sleep when they're making an AI image of Mary or St. Monica, as you mentioned.